Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrolis, and we are so excited for our guest today. I've had this one circled for a little bit. When I found that I was able to even get this coach on the podcast, I was really excited. Has a tremendous hockey experience. Was the head hockey coach at Holy Cross for 19 seasons, and was associate head coach at both Harvard University and Boston University, and is now currently the head hockey coach at Cushing Academy. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Paul Pearl.
Anthony, how you doing this evening? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm so excited. I got my Holy Cross hockey jersey on. I won this in a raffle 6 or 7 years ago, and I've been waiting to wear this. And what a better time to wear it with you tonight.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. That's from the year too that when we beat Minnesota. Those were the shirts we were rocking. So
yeah, the old logo here. Yeah, very cool, very cool. So obviously we're talking Holy Cross hockey here, so we might as well kind of continue that trend. I mean, just some facts about you, just so our audience can hear. You are the winningest hockey coach there at all time with 297 victories. So statistically the best coach that the program's ever had. You made 2 NCAA appearances in 2004 and 2006. You had 5 seasons that you won 20 or more games, which is incredible to even do that once, let alone 5 seasons. And while that was happening, you were also the head baseball coach at Holy Cross. I mean, I see that at the high school level, but very rarely do you see that at the college level. So I can't wait to really talk to you about that and get forward. But before we do that, obviously 19 years, I know you're an alum of Holy Cross and being able to coach there. I know it's special. When I was a coach, I was able to coach at the high school I went to. So being able to go and coach at the college, especially that's the choice. You chose to go there. You loved it there. And here you are. You were there for a very long time in your coaching career. So just maybe talk a little bit about your experience at Holy Cross over this long period of time.
Well, like you said, I graduated from there in 1989. Still most of my best friends are from there. Woman I married, Karen, she's also a class of 89. Both my kids were baptized there, and I got a chance to coach hockey there for 19 years and coach baseball there for 7. So, everything I have professionally, I owe to the College of the Holy Cross. It's a really special place.
Yeah. And so, talking about that over 19 years, I mean, I know just the coaching level at any level, having assistant coaches, obviously it's really important to your staff, but a lot of these guys are also trying to make names for themselves and maybe move on. So over a 19-year period, I mean, talk about how you look at staff, when you lose guys at certain positions or coaching positions, how do you look to replace your staff a little bit and kind of just keep the train going?
Well, we had an interesting situation. So as we phased from Division III to Division I with scholarships, we also were adding to our staffing. So when I first started there, we had just part-time assistants, and then we eventually got 1 full-time and 1 part-time. And that's when I left, that's what we still had. But, and we didn't pay great, but what I thought we did have was a good training area. So I would tell all the guys and try to get good guys in there by saying, hey, give me your time, give me your effort. And then, I'll do everything I can to get you your next job, as long as it's a promotion, in the league or whatever you might be looking for. So that worked out pretty well because I had a lot of good guys work for me.
Yeah, and I think that's great. A part of being able, like you said, I think what's really cool about any head coach that sees and can look down the road at that is, you're bringing guys on to say, hey, I'm going to help you develop and get to that point that you're going to be able to move on and take over your own program. And I'm sure once upon a time, there was plenty of people that gave you that opportunity as well. So
Right. Yeah.
Being able to kind of provide that for assistant coach, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think that for any coach, being able to help people move on and then do well in their lives, and you start seeing their families grow and all the things that you went through when you get to see them go through. And if you have a small measure of helping with their successes, you feel pretty good about it.
Yeah. And I love it, and obviously you have a passion for Holy Cross. So, I mean, you mentioned all the things that Holy Cross has done for your life. I mean, to the person you married. So obviously you have a lot of love for the school. And that's great. But one impressive thing I mentioned was being the baseball coach there. I mean, talk a little bit about, I mean, I see that at the high school level, but the college level is different because, the seasons are more longer and difficult in recruiting and being able to kind of balance both sports. That can't be easy. So just how were you able to do that for even if it was for 3 or 4 years? I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, I had unbelievable assistants, first off, especially in baseball. When we were talking before, I mentioned to you the first time I ever won my first career win in college baseball. I was sitting in my office in Worcester, phoning in the batting order for the three guys that were helping me out in baseball that day. So, and it was great. They brought the ball home for me. So that was pretty cool. But we were finishing up, we're playing Quinnipiac, I remember, in the playoffs, and we're getting ready for that for the week. So I didn't get a chance to go on the spring trip. So there's a lot of that, a lot of good people helping me work and helping me do things in those days was essential to have any type of success there.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty impressive and speaks to who you are a little bit, that you're able to kind of balance that. And like you said, having good people around you is really important. And talking about that staff development, I'm sure the same thing in baseball. You always want to just surround yourself with good people.
Right.
Obviously, being at Holy Cross for a really long time in a place that you love, you mentioned all the above. The one question I guess I have for you is you had a great opportunity to move on, but how difficult was it to kind of make that decision? I'm sure that wasn't easy and didn't come easy to you. So maybe talk a little bit about the decision-making and the process to move on.
Yeah, I had been there, like you say, 19 years. And I just wanted to try something different and see, go to a little bit bigger pond. Obviously Harvard was a national program with national aspirations. Not that we didn't have those at Holy Cross, but there was certainly a ceiling at that point, because we were still, even within the league, I think we had 4 less scholarships than everybody else, and that put us at 8 less than the rest of the country. So there was a limit that you could get the program to. Coach Donato was fantastic to offer me the opportunity to go to him. And, it just seemed like the right thing to do at the time. It helped also, family-wise, being around the Boston area. And one of my kids ended up going to a prep school here in Boston. They probably wouldn't have been able to go to had I stayed out in Worcester. And, just a lot of moving parts that all kind of came together at once. So it wasn't a slight of Holy Cross or anything negative about the school, just an opportunity for me to give it a shot, because you get to a point, you're there 20 years and you're like, I could probably be here 40. They'll name a bench after me or something after I go, and we'll move on. But I just wanted to kind of challenge myself a little bit from a professional standpoint and see what else was out there.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Obviously, go into a program, coached under a former professional hockey player is nice too, and seeing how he's developed that program. Being a hockey fan in this area, I mean, Harvard hockey over the last 6-7 years has just been one of those top programs in the country. Right. And what's great about it is, obviously, we know college hockey in Boston, period. I mean, Beanpot every year, you got your 4 teams. I mean, those teams are ranked in the top 20 or top 25 pretty much consistently every year. So right. It just shows you the type of hockey that is around here. So you joined as the associate head coach in 2014. And then statistically, when I dug into you a little bit, one thing that I found was pretty impressive was in the 2016-2017 season. So that was like your second or third year. You guys captured the Beanpot, the Ivy League, ECAC regular season champs, as well as winning, I think in a playoff, right? Reached in the NCAA Frozen Four, and you had over 28 victories in that season. So that was obviously year 2 or year 3 into your tenure. So you're watching that program develop as an associate head coach and loving what you guys are seeing. Your power play, what was really impressive is Harvard was 5th in the nation that year. You guys converted 27.5%. So we'll call it 30. We'll round up to a 0. But converting your power play that consistently, I mean, that is like a secret weapon in a game. If you can score power play goals and take an opportunity of a team making a mistake, that wins you hockey games. That wins you, like you said, you won 28. That wins you a lot of them. So, I mean, talk about how you go about developing a power play, penalty kill, and the whole special teams aspect behind hockey.
Well, I think one is, you have a great head coach like Teddy, who is, has some unbelievable ideas and can bring a lot of experience from the NHL, and that certainly works into it. And then, each coach kind of takes one of the special teams. Usually that's usually how it works on a staff. So, you get the power play and the other assistant gets the penalty kill, or vice versa. So, and in different years you do different things, but that year in particular, I think we all kind of got together on it. And we knew we had a lot of good talent. Like, and I mean, that's what it comes down to too, right? Is putting the right players on the ice, and then practicing a lot, and trying to execute. So it's not just putting the good players on the ice and hoping it works, but having a plan, and when, 4 out of the 5 guys on your power play eventually play in the NHL, if you can put them in a good situation, they're going to do well, and that's kind of what happened that year. But overall, that whole season was just magical. I mean, they won the Beanpot. We won the Beanpot. That was That was a lot of fun. And then, going to the Frozen Four, which means you win a regional. We won our league. Like, so there was just a lot of championships that year. It was a lot of fun. And, some good kids who had worked really hard to get to that point. So it was good to see them have that success.
And just because you mentioned something earlier, just because I'm always intrigued by the way, different sports coach. So does your head coach make that decision of who's kind of taking this and
Oh,
who's
yeah.
taking that? As an assistant coach, do you is there something you prefer having? Like, is there as a power play, penalty kill, is there something as an assistant that you feel like you kind of stand out a little bit more than anything else as
I
far
think
as
I've
that
done.
goes?
I've certainly done more power play over the years in my past, and probably most years. And then actually my last couple at BU, I switched over to the penalty kill, which was, Coach O'Connell wanted to switch things up as far as we wanted to get some different thoughts and ideas. So it all depends on where the team's at in a certain point too, and what the head coach is comfortable with. And, I've been fortunate to work with good guys, and we're good at kind of directing what to do, and then you figure it out from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm always intrigued by how other coaches, coach in different sports a little bit and how that all kind of works. Just me being really familiar with the football world.
Right.
One thing I mentioned earlier in the broadcast here is the bean pot, and we were talking about the bean pot. I mean, you obviously we're going to talk about you coaching at BU a little bit, but obviously coaching at Harvard, bean pot's huge. I mean, when I was a kid, going to the bean pot, the Garden was a huge thing, and like I said, you got 4 teams that are ranked. I mean, arguably could be top 10 teams at one point during a season, all kind of playing in the same tournament. I mean, just talk about the electricity with it, how serious it's taken being the champions in Boston and so on and so forth.
I would say, however serious you think it's taken, add something to that. Like, so, every one of those schools is killing for their, and that year we won at Harvard. I forget, it had been 19 or 20 years since they had won it. So it was that much bigger of a deal. And, you got to think, especially if you have an older team, and that year we had a lot of juniors and seniors. They had already been through 2 or 3 that they hadn't won. So it makes it that much more pressing, and it's just a lot of fun. And you play in that championship game, you hit the third period with a lead. It's about as nervous inside as you'll get as a coach. And you have to act that much calmer on the outside so that the guys don't feel it. But in your head, you're like, hey, we got to finish this one out. So we were fortunate enough to do that. And that was a lot of fun that year.
Yeah, I mean, I just in general, just watching the bean pot on TV, it feels like that playoff hockey atmosphere a little bit. Watching it, it's a little bit more physical, a little bit more fast, and I'm sure there's a pride thing being in Boston, and you want to be the school in Boston. I mean, especially if you're probably recruiting from a lot of the same ponds a little bit, so you definitely
no question, it definitely helps in that regard. And the other thing, to just give you the other side too, for as good as the bean pot final is, there was absolutely nothing worse than the consolation game. That is friends and family in the stands as the puck drops, and you're in this giant, 19,000 seat arena, and you could hear a pin drop in there. And, as a coach that, that game might be very important if you need to make an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. So that's a huge game. You might be, you're playing one, like you said, everyone in that tournament's usually top 20. So the other team is also playing in that consolation game. They need that game too. So it's human nature is not to be motivated, but the reality is you have to be ultra motivated for it. So, that's just another side to the bean pot too, that I don't know that people quite realize every year.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, I didn't even think of that truthfully, and I'm like you said, I'm sure, especially with those teams in that tournament, when you're looking at resumes to get those large bids, beating a team like that in a bean pot atmosphere is probably gets you a few extra points as far as getting that out, maybe possibly getting that at large bid over somebody else.
Oh, it absolutely does. It's a huge game.
Yeah. So, and then obviously we talked about the bean pot, and one of the other teams in bean pot is Boston University. And you kind of had went over there and coached for a few years there as well, kind of as far as associate head coach goes. But again, you understand, Boston players and understand the recruiting aspect of it. So how was it like playing Harvard? I mean, how was it kind of being on the other side of it, understanding maybe the system there a little bit, the type of players that are there, and kind of maybe helping coach against that when you guys would play them?
Well, I think, I think we're all familiar with each other. So I don't know that if that's as big a deal as if like you switched over to a school that you only played once every 10 years. And for some reason you ended up on their staff and you were playing against them. And then you might be bringing some insider secrets, but I mean, BU and Harvard play once or twice every single year. So there's not a lot to hide there, and you kind of, everyone follows each other in Boston too. Cause like you say, from a recruiting standpoint, it's really important to hopefully have yourself stand out a little bit in that. So It was weird in that, hey, I was just coaching over there last year, but it was also, very similar in that we knew each other. So I don't know how big of a deal that would have been.
Yeah. I find it awesome. I mean, in the sense that, you've had an unbelievable coaching career, and a lot of it's within this area, and
Right,
continuing, jumping into Cushing Academy here. I mean, this is, Cushing Academy, since I've been young, is always known as, like, if you played hockey there, you were an elite hockey player that was going to be playing Division I hockey and probably even have an opportunity to play professionally, being that good, and so on and so forth. And when you were hired as the head coach, I'm just going to read, Randy Burton, the head of the school, had said, "We sought the best candidate possible to continue Cushing's established tradition of hockey excellence. I am proud to say that we found the perfect match in Paul Pearl. He has an excellent record as a winning coach, and the professionalism, integrity, and competitiveness that will elevate our program." I mean, talk about taking over. I know you're taking over for like a legend there, but
Yeah.
maybe just for coaches out there that listen to this podcast, maybe a little bit of the interview process as far as what you went through. Obviously you have a resume that is phenomenal, but just, you obviously have to sit and go through that process. Maybe just talk a little bit about that process, and obviously taking over for a legend a little bit.
Yeah, well, yeah. Number one, whenever you're coaching at a place where the rink is named after the guy you replaced, you have to do a good job to keep up. And the reason I even knew about the job being open was Steve called me. So Coach Jacobs has been a friend for a long time, and I've respected what he's done. Coached a lot of his players after they played there, and he's a heck of a hockey coach and a heck of a person too. So he called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to be stepping back. Would you be interested in coming out?" And went out there for a day, and I had been there a bunch to the baseball field and to the hockey rink. I'd never been on the campus before, and just I was wowed. And walking around, I got and talking to all the people there, and it's about as close to a college job as you can get without it being a college job. And that's kind of how the feeling I got, and that was important to me. Because you don't want this complete change of lifestyle. And, this school, it was going to be important to win hockey games and to be good and to develop kids and, get them onto really good colleges and do all the things that I feel pretty comfortable trying to do. And it was just had a great feel to it. So that's kind of how it went. Wasn't a long drawn out type of process, probably had like 3 or 4 conversations, one trip out there. And then I was fortunate enough that they offered me the job.
That's phenomenal. That's awesome. And yeah, obviously taking over for a legend is not easy. Like he said, somebody who has a rink name after him. Obviously, that's big shoes to step in, but you've put yourself in big situations over the years, and you can handle that, I'm sure, with no problem. But one thing, like you mentioned, taking over a program like that is just the amount of talent that is there. I mean, when I was doing research, just kind of go backwards a little bit, obviously Cushing Academy, they're considered one of the top, if not the top, independent schools in the country. I mean, we're not talking the area, we're talking the entire country. They've had back-to-back appearances in New England championships. 8 players from the 2021 team earned Division I scholarships. And 4 of Cushing's players are currently playing on the USA national team at the 17-year-old camp. So again, you got some talent there for sure. So talk about just kind of what you have taken over, what you can tell me about your squad a little bit coming into the season, and what to expect from Cushing Academy.
Well, it's an interesting one because we have all of those things, and all the players you're talking about. We did have a lot of kids leave because of the pandemic, that either graduated or left the year early because they kind of started their junior year because there wasn't any prep school hockey last year. So we still have a high level of talent, but we only have about half the team back this year. So a lot of new guys, which will be a lot of fun, kind of trying to develop that chemistry between those guys, because we do have talent, there's no question, and trying to put together a team that plays to the standards that Cushing wants to set. And certainly I'm excited to work with these guys. And it's a younger group, but it's not that much younger. And everything I've got to know the guys on campus so far, it's a pretty motivated group and a very, very dedicated bunch of kids. So hopefully we can get good things going.
Did the colors switch you to mind to go there, being matching Holy Cross and everything?
It's unbelievable. It is absolutely. I'm back to purple. I love it. So we're gonna.
You could probably wear a lot of the same gear that you might have had before and sneaking in there. And then
when I left Holy Cross, I remember one of the last things I did was Giuliano Pagliaro, who is now at Penn State, was my assistant coach at the time, and I got a giant green trash bag. and filled it with everything I had from Holy Cross. And it was my going away present to him. So I don't have that much. Some
Oh,
of the stuff
wow.
that I got from Coach Berard over the last couple of years, like at golf tournaments and stuff. So I do have some Holy Cross stuff, but nothing that will rival what I'm wearing, what I'll be wearing in the rinks and all that. The Cushing Penguins is a pretty cool logo, and we got nice uniforms, and we make the purple look really good.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. When I was doing my research, I'm like, oh, wow, I got to ask him this. This is kind of funny. So obviously, like, it being a coach in this area, especially at Harvard at BU, I mean, were you at Cushing a lot recruiting kids yourself? I mean, obviously it's talent. You mentioned it. You have talent at some of the top in the country. I mean, were you there a lot as a coach,
Yeah.
recruiting kids out of there?
Yeah, because even if you're not watching a specific Cushing kid, you know that a kid that on another team that might be playing against them is going to get challenged that night. So that's a good game to go watch them play. Some kid from Thayer or Dexter or something like that. When they go head to head with Cushing, then you're going to get a great barometer of how good a player he is. But yeah, so I've been there a ton. And they have I keep saying we have the Watkins tournament at New Year's, which is a great New Year's tournament that a ton of scouts are at, both college and NHL. So and we bring in great teams for that. So if you come to go to Cushing, you're going to get seen, and you're going to have the opportunity to play in front of all the college guys and all the pro guys.
So, and I'll ask you this as a Cushing question, but I guess I could ask you this across the board being a coach. As far as recruiting guys goes, I mean, what type of athlete are you looking for? What type of overall person are you looking for when you go into the recruitment process? Because yes, there is a lot of talent out there, but obviously the complete package is what coaches are kind of looking for in a lot of senses. So what is it that you maybe specifically look for a little bit more than maybe, something else?
I would say, first and foremost, it sounds like a throwaway line for any coach, but like character. And these kids are still developing their character. They're younger, there's no question. But I'm still, and the people working with me are still going to talk to the coaches that he plays for, people that know him, to make sure that it's the type of kid that, like, I'm going to want kids who want to get better, and not just in hockey, but academically, be good, good part of the Cushing community, all those things. Finding out as much as you can up front before the kid steps foot on campus is very, very important. And then, the one simple thing that I think sometimes, I don't know, I didn't invent this either, but it's something I've always thought of, is I want kids who want to go. When I've been recruiting kids, no matter where I've been, I feel like if I have to talk you into it, like what you see in the movies, the movies about the college coaches, like, if you have to be talked into going, you probably don't want that kid no matter how good he is, because you want a kid that kind of sees what your school can provide, sees what the development is, sees what the academics are, sees what Cushing Academy is all about. And that's something he really wants, because if someone goes in even 90%, you can't. You have to be in 100%, and then kind of the improvement and the development can begin.
Yeah, and I, the whole aspect of it, I mean, just like I said, sport to sport, it's always nice to kind of really see what coaches are really looking for and what their expectations are. And, character always is the one that is said. And you might say it seem as cliche as some people might think it is. It's truth, like you want to, I mean, because talent gets you so far, but everyone's talented, right? So then what, so I totally.
Well, I think not to cut you off, but I just think
Yeah.
it's important you find out the character about, a 16-year-old kid looking at your school by talking to other people. Like
Right.
that kid's still in the kind of the formative years, and what's he like when no one's watching, or what's he like, Tuesday night in practice, as opposed to just when the lights are on for the game. So you can find that stuff out. It takes a little extra work and a little extra digging, but when you do that, I feel like you get a better result in the end in who ends up on your campus.
Yeah, and question, I guess, with young kids too. I mean, social media, as far as your program goes. I mean, how active is social media? Whether it's just the athletic department itself, or the hockey program having a Twitter or Instagram or whatever. I'm finding all these football games that I'm going to and covering on Friday nights, their social medias are like popping like crazy. And I don't know if it's because it's post-pandemic and everyone's trying to get people to go to games and build school spirit
Right.
back up
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. But the schools that I've gone to in particular, I mean, there's themes at games of like whiteouts or blackouts or pinkouts, or they have Halloween themes coming up. So it's kind of cool to see that a lot of schools are doing that across the board. I mean, how active is that social media to really get the fan base rocking?
Well, I think our social media, if is really good. And between the regular just Cushing site and then the Cushing hockey site, they put out a lot of information for people to find out about our school. And then also for the people who are part of the school to be able to see what's going on. You know, like we live stream all of our games because we have a kid on the team from Switzerland and we have another kid on the team. You know, not everybody's from Medford and Winthrop. Like, you know, people are all over the place. So, you know, that whole use of the internet, which I think Cushing does an unbelievable job with, will be huge for us. And, you know, just getting the information out about the school, like I say, for people looking is really important. But more importantly, letting people know what's going on a day-to-day basis with that, be it streaming or social media or whatever it is. That's important too, because you want people to feel comfortable that their child is at that school, right? And you're an extension of their family once they come to you, and they feel good the more information you can get them. And, you know, like I say, the school does a really, really good job with it.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, you know, and I didn't realize how important it was till I really started covering these games. I mean, if you want a kid to come to your school and they're choosing between you or 2 or 3 other places, you want your social media to be active to see not just what's the product is out there, but what the environment is. I mean, when we cover football games, we're in the stands, you know, we're covering the band, the cheerleaders, we're rating the concession stand. I mean, we're trying to give them an experience that people in town would look at that being like, wow, I want to bring my 7 or 8-year-old to the football game because there's a lot of fun stuff there and there's a lot of cool stuff that's going on, and we might as well, you know, and they might not have somebody who's tied to the program, but from a recruiting standpoint, obviously if kids are seeing that the place is just constantly rocking and that you guys are, you know, kids love seeing themselves, especially on social media. So the more you can show that off, I think, you know, the upper hand you have in that recruiting process for sure.
Oh, and, you know, and the recruiting of your students to come to games is really important. Like you're saying, like, that's a great point because, you know, as opposed to 1984, you know, coming to a Winthrop High hockey game, now a kid has his phone, he's got his computer, he's got an iPad, he's got all different things that, hey, he could just stay in his room that night and watch. You know, I think it's a big problem with a lot of the smaller college football programs in this area in New England now that, you know, good crowds used to be 15,000. Now a good crowd's 8, 7.
Right.
And it's still a good crowd, but it's not what it was. And everyone's like, oh, you know, everyone has all these different reasons. I think the main reason is there's just way more options for, you know, young Anthony Petrellis to be able to do something else, you know, and you have to have all those things you're talking about, the excitement at the games and, you know, different things, a whiteout or whatever it might be to draw the kids in for that, you know, and it's only going to get more. It's not going to get less when it comes to that stuff.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, we have like every high school we've gone to, we've had kids like reach out to us being like, hey, can we send you videos of what's going on at the game or updates or the crowd? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. You know, because again, you're still showing off high school football, whether you're at a game physically or people are reporting from another game. I mean, I just think it's these kids, that's what they love. I mean, that's like you said, they got tablets in their hands, their phone in their hand, everything else. They click a few things. You're on social media. You can look up anything you want, find anything you want. So no, I totally agree. One thing I really like to ask coaches just in general is how much time do you take away from hockey when hockey season is over? Like how much time is it that you're just maybe like refueling a little bit, spending some family time, maybe going away before you're locked in, or maybe you're not, maybe you're just kind of going year round, but you know, do you like to kind of take some time away and do some things that you enjoy doing?
I mean, definitely every year I take a week where the phone goes away and everything goes away. You know, you have to do that. And that's just like a reset week. And that's being fair to your family too, right? But I would say, you know, hockey's the kind of sport and recruiting in the way it all goes, it's really hard to do more than that. Now, that doesn't mean you don't take weekends. You know, listen, I have a great life. Like, I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm just sitting in a rink 24/7 for 365. But, you know, so you take those little 3 days, 2 days or whatever. But then other than that, you know, you're always recruiting, you're always talking. And when I say that, it's you're just always talking to people, finding out information about different things. And then you're also always in the back of your mind, and more so when you're a head coach than when you're assistant coach. How do we improve? How do we get better? What can we do? You know, would this little tweak be good? Can we switch something in the locker room to make it more comfortable for the kids? Can we do this, with our schedule so that maybe an extra 10 minutes of practice on Tuesdays, but not as good on, like, you drive yourself crazy with that stuff.
Right.
But I feel like that's healthy because it's always has you trying to get better. I know Jason Guerrero, who's an assistant now at Brown, he started with me at Holy Cross, a great coach. And he started when he came to me, he brought this up. So I'd like to say I invented it, but he didn't. And he learned it from someone he played over in, I think, Austria. That 2 months after the season, when nothing's really going on and you're kind of taking a breather and you're not on the road and doing things like that, pick one portion of the game, go back and analyze it for the season and see how you can improve it. So you got to jump on what you're doing the next September. So he brought that up. That's got to be 10, 11 years ago. I do that every year now. Take something, whatever it is. And you have so much video, right? So, say that year, you're only 84% on the PK. All right. You go in, pull out all the PK goals against. What happened on all of those things? How can we improve them? That type of thing, I think, is really important to do in the off season. Hopefully that you're improving. And the second thing is you want to go to as many talks and anything where someone that knows something about hockey is talking and going over any type of a performance or, showing things. You want to take that in because you can always learn from somebody, and I try to do as much as that as I can. And now with access to things on the internet, it's great, so you can pull up, Dave Hackstall. You just got to, Google around, right? And you find Dave Hackstall talking about his forecheck or, Cassidy talking about the power play or whatever. And you might, even if you get one or two nuggets from it, that's very, very important. I think that comes into, I'm fortunate that the job I have is, I really like the content of it. A lot of people, are lawyers or whatever they are. And though they make a lot of money or they do really well at it and they have all kinds of success, they don't necessarily love what they're doing. So the minute it's over, that's when they just want to break from it. I don't really feel like I want a huge break from hockey ever, just because I like talking about it and watching it and seeing it. And, it's been a big part of my life that I enjoy.
Yeah, and keeping sharp. Obviously, like as a football coach, sometimes I argue my favorite part was going to conferences and learning. I mean, I was a defensive back coach for a while, and I used to split between defensive back conferences and wide receiver conferences because I wanted to hear what they were teaching receivers about open space concepts and so on. Right. So I would always kind of sit in and think about, okay, leverage and how I'd have them play in certain situations. So yeah, educating yourself no matter what level it is, like you said, even if you get one or two things from it, it might change the way you coach something conceptually and makes things easier for kids a little bit. So
right. And I do think that we're fortunate to be in the sport of ice hockey because it is still a pretty congenial group of coaches, be it prep school or college or pro, and everybody's pretty helpful. I mean, we all compete and we all, want to win and all that, but I think there's a lot of sharing of that stuff. And then I've been fortunate enough, I run the player development for Mass Hockey. So that's like the 17s, the 16s, the 15s. So I have a staff of guys from all different schools, and we'll spend a lot of time just talking hockey sometimes in between like the tryouts when we're watching the kids. So right away you have a built-in conference right there, and that's just regular work. So it works out really well.
Has technology become like a prerequisite for the job? I mean, when you're looking at staff, do you say like, I kind of need guys who are technologically savvy, and if not, maybe that's a reason why you may not hire?
Yeah, you have to be really good. The higher the level, the better, obviously. But you even at some lower levels, you have to be able to do video. You have to be able to do some statistical analysis. You don't want to get caught up in the statistical analysis, but some of it's really good. And you might think you were great because you won 4-3 in overtime, but the reality is, they possessed the puck 61% of the time and your goalie just stood on his head, so we got some work to do here, boys, so that those types of things I think are really helpful, and being able to use that and know what's useful to you and how you coach is really important. Not just for what you use, but for what you can kind of toss away too.
Yeah. And again, I love all that stuff because I feel like since starting this podcast, the one thing I've started to learn is like more technology, specifically with, iMovie and social media itself with Instagram and the things you can do. And as a coach, there was nothing cool than having Huddle or our programs that we use for football to be able to cut clips, send messages, write a message in there to say, hey, watch your leverage or watch this or what were you doing here? And yeah, I mean, knowing how to do that stuff's a game changer, because that's what kids are nowadays. They understand that stuff at the snap of your fingers. And if you're a coach, you have to be able to talk their language. And sometimes their language is being able to show them a visual that makes more sense than trying to explain it to them on a chalkboard or a whiteboard or just verbally. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say that the dry erase board, other than designing a drill, when you maybe can use that once, twice, 3 times a year, because if you use it very few times, then the guys get it. But if you think you could go back, like I can't do what I did in 1997 at Holy Cross in terms of, the X's and O's up on the board all the time. If I don't, it's just not the way their minds process now. They see so much video from such a young age. And the other thing is too, when you're working with a kid, like there's obviously team video, and this is what we're doing on the power play. This is what they're doing on the penalty kill, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of individual improvement, video is unbelievable in the sport of ice hockey. Now, I don't know if other sports feel that way, but in terms of the sport of ice hockey, in terms of taking that one kid, you watch a couple of hours of his video, you break it down to 7 minutes of clips, and then you have him sit in your office with you and you go over it. That is where you see the most improvement by far with a player, because here it is, and they process it well, and then they can enact it when they go out the next time.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that as a young coach how important that was till I started moving up positionally into a coordinator, and then technology is everything. And when kids can see it visually, it just makes the world of difference being able to teach it and coach it. So
No
yeah.
doubt, no doubt.
So again, I ask all this. This is the last question I'll ask you before we, our 2-minute drill. But I ask a lot of coaches this question, and talk about, especially to young coaches out there that are looking to get into it. I think sometimes, what I hear from a lot of coaches is some young coaches want to come in and just think like within 2 or 3 years they should be a head coach, or they should be moving up, so on and so forth. Talk about just like what your advice would be to young coaches that do have aspirations to maybe be a head coach. It was a high school, collegiate, or professional level, that you feel is really important advice that they should take when kind of pursuing that career and moving forward.
Yeah, I would say, I have a couple of things actually. One is understand there's a lot of good coaches out there, a lot. And you can't take promotion or lack of promotions or not getting this job or not getting that job or not being thought of as this or that. You can never take it personally. It's not in the sport of ice hockey more than any. If you're in New England with all the hockey that's played here, there's still only 60 Division I schools in the entire country.
Right.
Like the numbers go really small, really quick. And, that's why I feel fortunate to have been the head coach of Holy Cross for 19 years. Like I had one of 60 jobs in the country. That's a pretty big deal. So when you have those guys want to stay there. So they're all working really, really hard to get to that point. But if I went back more to answer specifically your question, if you go back to the beginning, and I think you just cannot gain enough knowledge about the sport of ice hockey. You know what I mean? Try to learn. Don't be that guy that says, hey, yeah, I'm really good with forwards. No, you played forward. Don't be just comfortable with that. Learn about defensemen, learn about goaltenders. Just like you were saying, you were sitting in on meetings for the receivers and the D-backs. Like it's important. Like one of my throwaway lines, or one of the throwaway lines out there that I can't stand, is when a head coach will say, I don't deal with the goalies. Like I don't know anything about it. And it's like, that by far in sport, other than maybe a pitcher, is the most important position there is. You have to know about the goalies. Now, does that mean you can, speak it as well versed as Brian DeCord or someone like? No. I mean, obviously not. You're not going to know every technical aspect of it, but you better have a pretty good sense of your goaltenders. Like that guy's really, really important. I'm pretty sure Bruce Cassidy pays really close attention to his goaltenders. You know what I mean? Like that's winning and losing, keeping your job, not keeping your job. And so for coaches, get to know it all as much as you possibly can, get in the rinks, and the last part is just have fun with it. Like the beauty of this is I haven't had a real job since I was landscaping back in the summer before my junior year of college. Like, this is pretty good, and I've made it this far. See if I can keep fooling them for another 13, 14 years and we'll call it a day. But, I just think you got to have a lot of fun when you coach, because that comes off with the kids too. If you're just wired tight and just miserable all the time, your team's going to be wired tight and miserable, and you have to have fun with it. And that doesn't mean you're not demanding and making sure everybody's, towing the line. You certainly do, but there's a way to do it that maybe when I was younger, I was tried to be a little more militant. And now I feel like you can get the same message across without having to try to be, General Schwarzkopf, like you can have some fun with it and still have a good, disciplined, hard playing team.
Now, I said this was the last question, but I just want to ask you something off of it, just because you mentioned them having that balance. I mean, talk about your practices a little bit. Like, I know in football, a lot of it's time for us, 15 minutes of this, 10 minutes of this, 7 minutes of indie. Like, we want to make sure we got certain things in quality time. And that doesn't mean like, okay, the timer's up, we're not moving on. Sometimes if we're having a crappy part of practice, like, no, we need a little bit more work here. I'm extending this 5 minutes. I mean, and you talk about that balance of it being fun, like, the maybe misconditioning. We'll put some lineman out there and punt the ball to him. If he catches it, no conditioning, or if he drops it, everyone on the line. So in hockey, do you find that balancing your practices are really important as far as, getting the things that need to get done, but throwing some curveballs or fun things in there, maybe towards the end or maybe in the middle of it, just to keep the kids really engaged in what you're doing?
Yeah, I think that's huge. I mean, there can be a grind to a hockey season. Now go back to college. College is the longest spanning of all college sports, right? So your first semester and second semester, you're missing, October break and you're missing spring break. So, I mean, it's a long, and you really have to mix it up and keep it fun. But I do think there's a fine line there. I think you do have to be a little footballish in that you design a practice and it's going to be 75 minutes and you're breaking everything out to the minute. And you as a coach, it's your job to kind of stay on it. And I'll say to teams a lot of the time, be like, all right, guys, we scheduled for 64 minutes today. If we go a minute afterwards, it's your fault, not mine, and let's be sharp and let's do this. And, I think preparation by the coach. And then, if you're going to practice at 4, everybody dressed by 10 minutes of 4, you go over that practice in the locker room. So you don't have to stop and kneel down and watch, look at the board a lot. You're moving drill to drill, and, you can get your conditioning done in hockey through the practice that
Working
you run.
hard. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
There's always a spot for, goal line and back. No question. I mean, that's, there's some discipline to that. And there's some camaraderie you can build by having some of those harder practices sometimes. But if you can keep the pace up in your practice and you don't have some ridiculous roster of, 30, 31 guys and everybody's getting a ton of reps and all that, you can usually get what you need done 75 minutes. Like that's a good practice, and you break it up into 5:15s, and, there's a whole methodology to it that I've always used that I'm sure I stole it from somebody, but I'm still sticking to it to this day. And it seems to work out pretty well.
Yeah, and I think you have to, like you said, that's the one thing I found was just that practice went a lot smoother when the schedule was great and you were moving and kids knew what to expect. I mean, when they walked on the field, they knew what we were working on those days and when we were working on it. So, and we had all sorts of, as many interns as we could to work with us. They had the painters thing so we could get, inside drill and all that fun stuff. And I'm sure in hockey, you guys have, especially at the D1 level and even at Cushing now, you guys probably have top-notch technology to catch a lot of that stuff. So that's always fun.
Right. Well, we definitely do. One last point on that too is as far as the practices go, there's also, you can have that kind of shell of your 5:15s to get the 75, but there's 30 different 2-on-1 drills, and there's 40 different 1-on-1 drills, and there's 17 different ways to work on your power play and 23 to work on your penalty kill. So you can go a whole season without ever running the same practice while staying within that same format.
How much are you working on you, like as a team early on in practice versus towards the end, maybe getting into like playoffs or whatever, that you maybe focus more, okay, this is what a team does to shut them down for a series or shut them down for a big game? I mean, is there a discrepancy as far as how much you work on yourselves versus how much you might have a game a Tuesday night game and then a Thursday night game. So you're not necessarily getting a lot of time to prepare for a team. So do you find that you're working on yourself a lot more than maybe trying to prepare for your opponent?
I just, teams I've always coached and that my philosophy has always been, 99% of it is worrying about yourself.
Okay.
You take care in hockey's day. Don't forget hockey's, kinetic, and hockey is chaotic, and it's not one play at a time like football or one pitch at a time like baseball or even basketball where you can walk it up and call a play like hockey. So you got to really worry about yourself. With that said, teams have tendencies. So all the dead puck plays, like a face-off, how they start, a power play, what they're doing on it, what are their tendencies on a penalty kill? That's where the value in kind of looking at video, I think, in pre-scout in hockey comes in. But other than that, it's really like, can you, put it in your turn? Can you block and tackle? You know what I mean? Can you pass the puck? Can you hit the net with shots? Are you disciplined? Do you stay out of the box? That's another one is in hockey. Like they actually, when you take a penalty, they take a player off the ice. It's pretty penal, what I mean, as far as penalties go, right? And so, yeah, it stinks to go back 10 yards, but you can still, if you just watch the Dallas game, you can still on second 25 get 24 yards back. Good luck trying to score goals against a good team when you only have 4 players on the ice and they have 5. So that's where those are the things I think you really have to maintain as a group and as an organization, and those are the principles and the things that you want to build up to as an organization, so that's what becomes important. So that's Medford football, that's Cushing hockey, that's what we want them to think of and how we do it. And, it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be games you take too many penalties. I don't care who you are, but you have to then work to fix that so that at the end of the year, hopefully you're one of the least penalized teams. And, all those things you can measure, going back to stats, stats are never good for one game, right? Stats are always good for the long haul. So, you look at your 32 games that we play, and then you'll be able to figure some stuff out about yourself statistically that, there's always trends and where you're moving towards.
Those numbers must be funny to see though sometimes, because maybe you recognize things, but sometimes you might not recognize something and be like, oh, wow. Like I heard a stat the other day how the Patriots has only scored like 8 touchdowns in like 51 possessions before this Dallas game. So I don't know what it is now, but I mean, I was like, wow, I knew their offense wasn't great, but statistically I was like, holy moly, like that's a tough stat. I mean, I'm sure those numbers are eye popping in hockey as well.
Yeah. I think you find sometimes, again, when you measure it throughout the year and then you go back and again, you pull out your PK for the year and you say, okay, we gave up 19 penalty kill goals this year. And then I don't know, this is a stat as much as a trend. If you look and you see if 8 of those came off of rush or 8 of those came off of goal line plays, that's where the flaw in what you're trying to do defensively is. So that's always a good thing to measure, and then probably one of the bigger stats that like I've been on this for a long, like I forget again, I steal everything, but someone brought up face-offs to me back a long time ago. First time I went to the NCAA tournament, we lost to North Dakota 3-0 out in Colorado Springs. And I had the 2 best face-off guys I ever had on the same team. I'm talking any team I've ever coached, the 2 best were on that team. So we lost to North Dakota, and if they threw the sticks in the middle of the ice, other than our goaltender, like we had really, really good players, but we didn't have anybody that North Dakota would have said, oh, we missed him recruiting type of thing. Like we were older, better, great team, awesome hockey players, really, really good. But those 2 centers, plus our third guy was good too. We won like 74% of the faceoffs that night. And that's how we kept the game close. You know what I mean? Like we always possessed the puck when it dropped. And that was a huge, huge factor for, and then 2 years later when we went back and we beat Minnesota, we were more talented. We were a little bit faster. We're a little bit old. We were even older, believe it or not. And so maybe a face-off wouldn't be as important. But when it comes to teams that especially are trying to pull an upset or trying to, hang with a big gun, things like face-offs and all those statistical things become more and more important.
Wow. I said to you a few minutes ago, I got one more question for you, but I really like listening to you. I love listening to your answers and like things I've never really thought of in the sport of hockey and how important they are. So I appreciate you taking that few extra minutes really to just kind of keep going with it.
Pleasure.
So we're going to jump into our last segment. It's called the 2-minute drill. So basically how it works, I'm just going to fire some rapid fire questions at you. 1 or 2 word answers. If you want to explain, we're lenient. I get a red flag. If I want you to explain something a little bit more, I may throw the red flag if I want to hear it, and vice versa. If you want to explain something more, you most certainly can too. So let me just get the timer set and here we go. Is the team, when you were head coach at Holy Cross, the team as a coach and team as a player, what team could you just like, you wanted to beat the most? Like the team you just always want to beat?
As a player, it was Bowdoin actually, because we were playing at the Division II level then, and they were a big rival. And most of us that were at Holy Cross didn't get into Bowdoin, so we were kind of fired up for that. When we were when I was coaching, it was Mercyhurst. We had like a huge rivalry there, and we won in 04 and 06. We actually should have won in 05, but they upset us in the semifinals in that in-between year, or we would have had three in a row there. So, and Rick Gawkins, the coach up there, does a fantastic job. We're really good friends, but we had a heated rivalry.
That's awesome. That's great. So as a recruitment standpoint goes, you mentioned goalie's the most important position in hockey. What would you rather recruit in? A person who can score a lot of goals, offensively very good, or a big, strong defenseman that can give you a lot of minutes, play the PK a lot, and is extremely dependable?
All right, you're going to throw a flag on me, but I do love the big D.
All right,
But
I'm throwing it. Yeah, I'm just curious no matter what you picked.
I'm going to parse my words here, though. Like the great Sean Walsh, I'll steal a quote from him, recruit offense and teach defense. So offense in a lot of ways in the sport of ice hockey is a God-given thing that kids come in with. So I would say I'd go after the guy who could score and hopefully get a bunch of big lugs that we can teach how to play defense.
That's perfect. The answer. I love it. As a coach at Holy Cross, what was the most rocking hockey arena you guys played in? Like when you went there, the crowd was just always ripping and roaring.
West Point was really, really good then. And actually Holy Cross was. And we only have 1,100 seats, but when we had it humming, that place was awesome. And it had the really, really low roof. It was like a miniature version of Walter Brown back in the day, where it was just loud and fun, and the kids in the crowd had a lot of fun watching it, and our players had a lot of fun playing there.
You've coached obviously 6-7 seasons playing in the Beanpot. What was the most exciting or biggest Beanpot game that you can remember, whether you were at Harvard or BU, that you played in that was just exciting, back and forth, really good hockey? I'm sure there were a lot, but
it was. I mean, we lost unfortunately in overtime to Northeastern 2 years ago, but we tied that game with 1 second. It was less than a second. It was 0.03 seconds. Trevor Ziegler scored from Jake Wise. That was big. And then we lost in double overtime and a half. I feel like Eichel scored against us in the Beanpot when my first year at Harvard. Honestly, I'd have to look. I think we were in the third overtime. It was absurd. We just kept playing it. I thought the game would never end. But the most exciting was when we won. That was surreal. We beat a really good BU team. And like I said before, all those kids on our team had a lot of heartache in that tournament. And so for them to come out on top that year was a lot of fun to watch them.
What's one word you would use to describe your coaching style?
One word. Tick, 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 tick. Demanding.
Okay. And the last question would be, what's one word your players would use to describe your coaching style?
Fabulous guy. No, I think, two words, fair but demanding. I think demanding, yeah, definitely. We get after it, no question.
I love it. All right, Coach, you survived the 2-minute drill. I appreciate the time.
Only a few flags.
Hey, no problem at all. We love the flags. A little bit more getting the guest talk, so it's great. So I just want to say thank you for coming on. I know you got a busy schedule. You got a big season coming up. Obviously, taking over a very good program. You're a very good coach, and I'm very excited to be following you guys this year. And really, maybe we'll come down and cover a game like we've been covering some football games. Maybe we'll come down there and cover a game and get some of that behind the scenes stuff. So that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd love to have you, Anthony. Thank you for all you do. And thank you for having me on tonight. This was fantastic.
Yeah, awesome. So again, from Beyond Podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, Paul Pearl, Cushing Academy. Till next time.